Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. At least 52 Palestinians are killed in Israeli strikes today, including 33 at a Gaza City school sheltering displaced families, according to reports. And Israel says the site hosted key terrorists, but rescuers report most victims were women and children. Donald Trump blasts Vladimir Putin after Russia unleashes its biggest air assault of the war, firing 367 drones and missiles on Ukrainian cities, leaving at least 12 people dead. Speaking from New Jersey, Trump says, "I'm not happy with Putin. He's killing a lot of people." King Charles begins a two-day visit to Canada today, set to open Parliament in Ottawa for the first time in nearly 7 decades. The trip signals strong ties with Ottawa amid US pressure and Trump's growing interests in the north. French President Emmanuel Macron inks a major deal for 20 Airbus jets in Hanoi today as part of a wider push to boost French influence amid US trade tensions. The visit marks the first by a French leader to Vietnam in nearly a decade. Donald Trump agrees to push back a massive tariff hike on EU goods to July the 9th after a good call with European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen. Trump warns he's still ready to impose 50% tariffs if a deal isn't reached swiftly. Leaders from across Southeast Asia gather in Kuala Lumpur for the 46th ASEAN Summit to tackle trade tensions, the Myanmar crisis and South China Sea disputes. Malaysia hosts amid tight security and back-to-back talks with the GCC and China. Iran says it won't suspend uranium enrichment to strike a deal with the United States as nuclear talks remain in limbo. Tehran adds no date is set for the next round of negotiations. Authorities seized 2 tons of methamphetamine off Sumatra in the biggest narcotics haul in Indonesia's history. Officials link the stash to a Golden Triangle syndicate with reach as far as Japan and New Zealand. Our top story today, Russian air defences downed 96 Ukrainian drones last night, with 6 shot down over the Moscow region, according to the Russian Defence Ministry. As per reports, no casualties or damage has been reported in the areas where drone debris came down. Meanwhile, Russian forces have pushed forward along the Donetsk front in the past week. The head of the Donetsk People's Republic, Denis Pushilin, has said that several settlements have been liberated in the region. On the other hand, Russia has attacked Ukraine for the 3rd night in a row, a day after the biggest aerial attack of the war so far killed at least 12 people and injured at least 79 others. The air raid alert lasted 6 hours in Kiev, according to the head of the city's military administration. According to Ukraine's Air Force, Russia launched 9 missiles and 355 drones overnight. This came after US President Donald Trump called his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin crazy for his attacks on Ukrainian cities and warned that any attempt at a total takeover of Ukraine would lead to the downfall of Russia. Trump has also criticised Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and accused him of doing his country no favours by talking the way that he does. Moreover, in a related development, a Russian military commander has claimed that Putin's helicopter was at the epicentre of a Ukrainian drone attack. Russia's air defense commander, Yuri Dashkin, has said that the incident took place on May the 22nd in Russia's Kursk Oblast, according to reports. The Kremlin has not issued any statement in this regard. We're now joined by Joshua Barnes, anchor and correspondent for NewsX World, to discuss this in more detail. Joshua, we'll talk about diplomacy in regards to this war in just a minute, but in regards to the battlefield, violence does not seem to show to be slowing down.
Yes, Thomas. Well, there have been further strikes as anticipated, given the recent provocations that both sides have shown with their drone and missile attacks. This, of course, a continuing theme that has waged throughout the ongoing war that is now into its 4th year. Of course, this conflict is continuing when talks of a ceasefire haven't been agreed, and that's something we can expect to see. Of course, civilians being impacted by these drones, interceptions taking place, but still drones getting through. There's a clearer image from the Ukrainian side. Of course, Western reports are detailing the individuals that have been injured, killed as well in these strikes on key cities across Ukraine. There are also strikes going on in Russia. Less information is put out by the Russian Defense Ministry, though they do comment on the number that have been intercepted. This situation is expected to continue as the war continues. More death and sort of travesty on the ongoing war is taking place on the battlefields with the direct fighting between Russia and Ukraine. A Ukrainian official in recent hours has said that Russia's forces are struggling for energy. They're losing energy and they're continuing their fight. And of course, we've seen support with North Korean troops fighting alongside Russia. Ukrainian troops, of course, continuing to stave off a Russian offensive that is claiming more ground in eastern Ukraine. The situation remains very similar on the battlefield as it has been in recent weeks. It seems like small, slow progress forward from Russia, taking more ground within the east of Ukraine. Gradually, it's seen about 20% of Ukraine currently now occupied by Russia. The drone strikes will continue as we have seen, potentially not to the extent that there was in the last 24 to 48 hours, but this is something we expect until a ceasefire can be agreed upon.
Yes, and Joshua, given that ceasefire that's been grabbing all the headlines, obviously Donald Trump now involved in mediating between Russia and Ukraine. What can you tell us about the movements in regard to the diplomatic front and a possible end to this conflict?
Yes, the thing with Donald Trump is he has said contradictory statements throughout this sort of peace negotiation process that we've seen in recent months. Again, he called out Vladimir Putin, saying he was crazy in recent comments. He's also said that his relationship with Vladimir Putin has been good in the same social media post. Trump, as we know, sometimes makes statements that don't necessarily match up with what his administration has said or what he himself has said previously. But there is a consensus that US support for these negotiations might not hold if both sides don't come to the table and work towards an agreement. Of course, the US 30-day ceasefire proposal that was backed by Ukraine and Ukraine's Western allies has so far gone nowhere. These first direct discussions for over 3 years that took place in Istanbul on the 16th of May. These lasted less than 2 hours, and despite a prisoner swap of 1,000 prisoners from either side being agreed, there's been no further movement on that, and there have been no talks that have been set up around peace, direct talks that have been announced by either side. Unfortunately, it is a bit of the same story that we've been reporting in recent days and weeks. Progress is not going to move forward until both sides can find some agreement on anything, whether that's who's going to be meeting who, at what location, at what time, or what both sides are looking for in this ceasefire. Ultimately, Russia have a set of rules that they don't want Ukraine to be doing. Ukraine themselves are looking at this in a way that they need assurances that Russia aren't giving them. Both sides want different things. Compromise will be needed. If that compromise is agreed upon, I think there might be some progress. But at the moment, with no talks even set up, it looks like it's going to be a continuation of pressure and calls for sanctions from Ukraine and Western allies on Russia. But ultimately, very little action is leading to discussions. It seems at the moment there aren't enough consequences surrounding these peace talks, meaning they're not happening.
Joshua Barnes, thank you very much. You are staying with us. For our next story, we move over to the Middle East, where an Israeli airstrike on a school sheltering families in Gaza City has killed at least 33 people, according to Gaza's Civil Defense Agency. Spokesman Mahmoud Bassal said most of the victims were children, with several women also among the dead and dozens more injured. The strike hit the Fahmy al-Jawjal school in the An-Daraj neighborhood. The Israeli military said it targeted a Hamas and Islamic Jihad command center operating from within the school. It claimed numerous steps were taken to mitigate the risk of harming civilians. In a separate incident in northern Gaza, rescuers say 19 people from a single family were killed in another Israeli strike on their home. Meanwhile, the Israeli army also reported intercepting one of 3 projectiles launched from Gaza as the country prepared for its nationalist Jerusalem Day march. Lastly, the international community of the Red Cross confirmed that 2 of its staff members were killed in a strike on their home in Khan Yunis. Ibrahim Eid, a weapons contamination officer, and Ahmed Al-Halal, a security guard at the ICRC field hospital in Rafah, both lost their lives. We're now once again joined by Joshua Barnes, anchor and correspondent for NewsX World. Joshua, we're hearing some tragic stories from the Gaza Strip. What can you tell us about today's events? Obviously, this is not the first we've heard of tragic tales unfolding, especially in recent times. Why are these things happening?
Well, yes, Thomas, to put it bluntly, these strikes are happening because the Israeli government and Israeli military are stepping up their offensive in Gaza. To provide some context on it, in around 48 hours, 200 separate sites have been struck within the Gaza Strip. This comes directly from the IDF. So expansion of military action within Gaza is something we've known has been coming and clearly is now playing out. Of course, for Israel, they say that Hamas are hiding within civilian populations. They historically have been hiding in hospitals, have been hiding underground, using civilian infrastructure as a shield, and that's the reason that there have been civilian casualties. Israeli military saying consistently throughout the war they are trying to keep that to a minimum. They say that they have been dropping leaflets advising people to vacate areas before these bombs have been dropped or aerial or ground offensives have taken place. Now, this information is sometimes refuted by local Gaza health organisations, also local officials as well. But the understanding is that there is, of course, collateral damage off the back of these strikes targeting Hamas. We've seen more areas hit now as a resumption of fighting took place months ago, following that ceasefire from the start of the year. Ultimately, Benjamin Netanyahu has now set out his stall. He's made it very clear Israel's new goal will be to control the whole of Gaza, and then they will be able to eradicate Hamas from there. The strikes that we've seen, the strikes reported by Hamas-run health officials, we must clarify that as well. A lot of these haven't been independently verified because it's tough for journalists, independent journalists that aren't already operating in Gaza, to enter the Strip with the current military action that is ongoing. But it is still a devastating situation. We know how devastating the aid blockage was, and the humanitarian crisis continues to wage on for millions of people who have faced displacement, who have faced starvation, if you're listening to several human rights groups. Of course, this is a situation where both sides argue very different things, and I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. But these ground offensives, these air offensives, will be continuing, and stories around bombings of potential shelters and hospitals is something we've become used to seeing, and I think we will continue to see until a ceasefire can be agreed, which looks at the moment unlikely.
Joshua, this comes in a chain of events. Just a couple of days ago, we saw the death of 9 of 10 children of a doctor on the Gaza Strip. We've also seen some international reactions to some of Israel's conduct, as well as a response from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What can you tell us about the international reaction to Israel's actions in the Gaza Strip right now?
Yes, there generally has been somewhat of a switch amongst certain world leaders. Condemnation about the conditions in which Gazans and Palestinians in Gaza are living in has come in. Questions around this aid blockade, serious questions have been raised. We've heard comments from the United Nations. Somebody like Tom Fletcher, a member of the United Nations, he said that within a 48-hour period, if aid didn't get in, 14,000 Gazan babies could die. It doesn't seem that that has been the case, but more aid has entered into the enclave. There is a clear worry about the living conditions and the starvation potentially of millions of people, and understandably so. Certain world leaders have looked at that and questioned some of the methods that Israel are carrying out. But their goal remains the same. They of course want to see the release of hostages. This is something that is placing pressure on the Israeli government from within Israel itself. One hostage release since the start and the resumption of fighting and military activity in the Gaza Strip from Israel. One hostage released since that aid blockade, which lasted 11 weeks, causing a serious difficulty for millions living within the enclave. The situation is a difficult one. It's a difficult topic because both sides are struggling, both sides are hurting. The country of Israel is suffering with these hostages following the 7th of October 2023 attack. But on the flip side, questions are being raised about the living conditions for so many in Gaza. That question is continuing to be raised. Those discussions continue to be had on the geopolitical stage. Something we will, of course, keep an eye on.
Joshua Barnes, thank you very much for that insight. We have some breaking news now. Russia has said that it has captured 2 border villages in Ukraine's northeastern Sumy region, where it has been mounting an offensive for weeks, 2 days after claiming another settlement there. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has said that Putin is defending Russia after the US president criticized the Russian president and called him crazy. The Kremlin has also said that the Russian strikes on Ukraine are retaliatory. We now move over to the Indo-Pacific, where the 46th ASEAN summit has opened in Kuala Lumpur, with leaders focused on strengthening regional integration and boosting resilience against global economic disruptions. Malaysia Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim urged member states to unite in the face of a shifting world order, warning that protectionism and unilateral tariffs, including from the United States, are threatening trade stability. He called for a rules-based global system and stressed the need to safeguard ASEAN's peace, stability and growth through open markets and cooperation. Anwar also highlighted stronger ties with global partners, including the first ever ASEAN GCC China summit, a sign of the region's growing strategic importance. The summit is set to adopt the ASEAN Community Vision 2045, a long-term plan to guide the bloc's development over the next 2 decades. Malaysia currently holds the ASEAN chair for 2025 under the theme Inclusivity and Sustainability. We stay in Southeast Asia for our next story, where France's President Emmanuel Macron is in Vietnam on a landmark visit, the first by a French leader in nearly 10 years. The trip marks a push to strengthen France's role in its former colony and global trade tensions. During his visit to Hanoi, both countries signed major deals, including a sale of 20 Airbus planes, satellite cooperation, nuclear energy, railway development, and a Sanofi vaccine partnership. The agreements come as Vietnam faces US pressure to increase American imports, a move to avoid tariffs as high as 46% that has sparked concerns in Europe about trade and shifts in the region. Macron also reaffirmed support for freedom of navigation in the South China Sea, a key issue for Vietnam amid maritime tensions with China. And in a broader message, Macron called for a global order based on law, warning against power-driven politics and rising instability. Let's take a listen in to what the French president had to say.
C'est bien une nouvelle page qui s'écrit entre nos deux pays, et dans tous les domaines, économiques, scientifiques, technologiques, industriels, militaires, stratégiques, culturels, universitaires, une volonté d'écrire une page encore plus ambitieuse de la relation entre le Vietnam et la France, entre l'ASEAN et l'Union européenne. Et j'ai redit ici à Monsieur le Président notre volonté d'avancer sur chacun de ces sujets et au fond d'une vision commune de ce que doit être l'ordre international, la stabilité dans nos deux régions.
We now move up to North America, where King Charles III and Queen Camilla are set to arrive in Canada for a 2-day visit today. The visit is seen as bringing a message of support for the country in the face of US President Donald Trump's threats of Canada as a 51st state. The King will read the speech from the throne to Canada's Parliament on Tuesday, marking it the first time since a monarch has delivered this speech in almost 50 years. It is expected to include a defence of Canada's sovereignty and to reject claims it should be taken over by the US. Prime Minister Mark Carney had invited the royal couple and will hold a meeting with them during their stay in Ottawa. There will be a ceremonial welcome at the airport and meetings with community groups, which are expected to include representatives of Canada's First Nation communities. The King will also meet Canada's first Indigenous Governor, General Mary Simon. This is the King and Queen's first visit to Canada since the start of their reign, after a planned trip last year was cancelled because of King Charles's cancer diagnosis. Now we have some more breaking news coming in. The leaders of Germany, France and Poland have criticised actions by the Georgian government, which they had said undermined democratic institutions. In a joint statement marking Georgia's Independence Day, the leaders said they condemn all activities of the Georgian authorities resulting in the democratic backsliding and the attacks against civil society, media and government critics. We have more breaking news. Pro-EU centrist Nuki Sodan has been sworn in as Romania's new president. The 55-year-old took the oath at Parliament, vowing to defend democracy and uphold the rights and freedoms of all Romanians. His swearing-in comes a week after he defeated his nationalist rival in a tense vote rerun. We now move over to South Asia, where an all-party delegation led by JD MP Sanjay Kumar Jha has just wrapped up a significant visit to Seoul, South Korea, focused on strengthening India-South Korea counter-terrorism cooperation. The high-level meetings with South Korean officials, lawmakers and think tanks were aimed at forging stronger partnerships and deepening mutual understanding on shared security concerns. In key discussions, the delegation highlighted India's unwavering commitment to united action against global terrorism and security challenges. The delegation is also scheduled to visit Indonesia, Malaysia and Singapore as part of their broader diplomatic mission. Let's take a listen in to what the head of the Centre for ASEAN Indian Students had to say about the delegation meetings held in South Korea.
Well, actually it is, but only important that we begin this diplomatic outreach from France, because India and France, we do enjoy a very deep, strong strategic relationship. It could be in the area of AI, it could be in the area of defense, because even recently we have had our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji actually visiting France and heading the, chairing the conference on AI, artificial intelligence. Therefore, it is only apt that we start from here. And besides that, I think country after country has been suffering the scourge of terrorism.
Another all-party 9-member delegation of eminent Indian parliamentarians led by BJP MP Ravi Shankar Prasad arrived in Paris today to deliver a powerful message on India's unwavering stance against terrorism. The delegation will be engaging with key stakeholders, including the French Senate's Parliamentary Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Armed Forces. Their discussions focus on strengthening parliamentary cooperation, enhancing the India-France strategic partnership. After their time in France, the delegation will head to Italy, followed by a visit to other key European destinations, including the United Kingdom, Germany and Denmark. We now move over to Europe, where the trial of Joel Lee Sau, one of France's most notorious sex offenders, enters its final stage today in the city of Vannes. The 74-year-old surgeon has admitted to sexually abusing or raping 299 patients between 1989 and 2014. Most of the victims were minors. 256 were under the age of 15 at the time of the abuse. The Sau admittedly carried out many of the assaults while patients were under anesthesia or recovering from surgery. He is currently charged with 111 counts of rape and 189 counts of sexual assault. On Friday, prosecutors requested the maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. They also called for him to be held under supervision even after serving his time. Prosecutor Stefan Kallenberger told the court, "You were the devil, and he sometimes wears a white coat." Defense lawyers, who have been praised for their respectful approach, are expected to argue for leniency on Lee Sau's cooperation and remorse. He has apologized in court, though many victims say his statements were robotic and insincere. The verdict is expected to come this Wednesday. Lee Sau is already serving a 15-year sentence from a 2020 conviction involving 4 children. European stocks surged at open on Monday, rebounding sharply after days of pressure. European equity indices opened higher on Monday, while DAX index of Germany and CAC of 40 of France gained. This follows news that US President Donald Trump announced a delay in the tariffs until July the 9th, easing fears of an imminent trade war. The move follows a phone call with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, which Trump described as very nice. He said the talks would now resume quickly to find common ground. Markets had slumped on Friday after Trump threatened to slap the tariffs from June the 1st. We have some breaking news coming in once again. Iran has ruled out any temporary halt to its uranium enrichment, despite growing pressure from the United States. A foreign ministry spokesperson made it clear that Tehran will not accept a 3-year freeze or any interim deal as part of nuclear talks. The remarks come as the US and Iran continue a tough standoff over Tehran's nuclear program. Both sides remain publicly firm on the issue of enrichment. Iran says it's waiting for Oman to confirm the date of the 6th round of talks. Despite reports of progress, no meeting has been scheduled yet. President Donald Trump said over the weekend that the US negotiators held very good talks with Iranian team, but Tehran warns if the approach is about limiting Iran's rights, the talks will fail. Iran insists its nuclear program is for civilian use only, while seeking relief from crippling sanctions. We move on once again. The United States and Japan have agreed to accelerate negotiations on tariffs, with both sides aiming for a mutually beneficial trade agreement. Tokyo is seeking the removal of a 10% baseline tariff, along with higher duties on automobiles, steel and aluminium, including the 24% reciprocal tariffs announced by President Trump earlier this year. Japan's lead train envoy Akazawa recently concluded a 3rd round of discussions in Washington. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba cited progress in the talks and is expected to meet President Donald Trump during the upcoming G7 summit. To help move talks forward, Japan may offer its shipbuilding technology, including capabilities for repairing US warships. Let's now turn to South America, where in Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro's ruling party has won a landslide victory in the legislative and regional elections. The main opposition, led by Maria Corina Machado, has called for a boycott, labelling the election a farce. Among dozens arrested in the days leading up to the vote was opposition figure Juan Pablo Guanipa, accused of leading a terrorist network to sabotage the election. Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello claims Juan was connected to foreign-backed mercenaries, which prompted the closure of the border with Colombia. With over 400,000 security forces deployed nationwide, tensions ran high. Yet, voter turnout was projected at just 16%, as many Venezuelans chose to stay home. Later, last year's presidential vote sparked deadly unrest, with 28 killed and hundreds of people jailed. We move on once again. Iran has summoned France's ambassador in Tehran to protest remarks made by the French Foreign Minister Joan-Noel Barrot. Following the victory of Iranian filmmaker Pafar Pahani at the Cannes Film Festival. Pahani won the prestigious Palme d'Or for his film It Was Just an Accident, which draws on his experiences in prison. Barrot congratulated Pahani, calling his win a gesture of resistance against the Iranian regime's oppression, a comment that sparked a diplomatic row. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson Mohammad Tanai called the remarks insulting and unfounded, accusing France of interfering in Iran's internal affairs. Tanai further criticised France for lacking moral authority, citing its failure to support Palestinians in Gaza. He demanded an official explanation from the French government, which the French envoy promised to relay to Paris. Tanai has faced multiple imprisonments for his outspoken criticism of Iran's government. Despite being banned from filmmaking and travelling, he secretly filmed It Was Just an Accident in Iran. In his acceptance speech, Tanai called for unity among Iranians, urging them to resist oppression and fight for their rights. We now move to the world of sport, where the acclaimed documentary filmmaker Marcel Ophuls, best known for his groundbreaking work The Sorrow and the Pity, has died at age 97. His family confirmed that he passed away on May the 24th. Ophuls, son of legendary German director Max Ophuls, made his global headlines with his 1969 film that shattered France's long-held myth of widespread resistance to Nazi occupation. Banned from French television for over a decade, the 4-hour documentary revealed the extent of collaboration under the Vichy regime, from everyday citizens to elites. Despite controversy, Ophuls maintained his work was not a condemnation but a look at human behaviour in dark times. He went on to win an Oscar for his film on Nazi war criminal Klaus Barbie, and remained a fiercely independent voice throughout his career. Marcel Ophuls was born in Germany in 1927, fled the Nazis and grew up in Hollywood. He later returned to France to build a legacy in documentary filmmaking that challenged nations to confront their past. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you.